All right, since you're listening, there's something I need to tell you about what's really going on. When you get to be my age, you realize most of the things you worried about didn't matter anyway. I don't know how much time you have. Nobody does, but I know this. Waiting for clarity is a trap. Clarity comes after commitment, not before. Start where you are. Use what you have. Say the thing. Make the call. Take the step. Life isn't fragile in the way we think. It's resilient. What's fragile is attention. Guard it. Where you place your attention, you place your life. That's all I've got left to say. I didn't learn these things quickly or gracefully. I learned them by living long enough to see patterns repeat. You don't need to repeat them too. If this saves you even a few years of quiet regret, then it was worth saying out loud. There's something else people don't like to admit. Most of your suffering is optional, not the pain. Pain happens. But the extra layers you add by resisting reality, replaying scenes, arguing with what already is. Acceptance isn't weakness. It's efficiency. Once you stop fighting what you can't change, you finally have energy for what you can. I want to say something about being right. Being right is wildly overrated. I lost relationships trying to win arguments that don't matter anymore. I can't even remember what they were about. All I remember is the distance that followed. Peace is often found the moment you decide not to prove your point. You should know this too. Nobody is watching you as closely as you think. Most people are absorbed in their own insecurities. That fear of judgment that keeps you from speaking, creating, trying, it's built on an illusion. Once I realized that, I felt strangely free. Embarrassment fades. Regret lingers. I used to think discipline was about forcing yourself. It's not. Real discipline is arranging your life so the right choices are easier than the wrong ones. Willpower runs out. Systems don't. If you rely on motivation, you'll keep starting over. If you rely on structure, you'll keep moving, even on dull days. Here's something subtle but important. Your inner voice becomes your permanent roommate. Choose how you talk to yourself. If you constantly criticize, rush, or belittle yourself, that voice will be there in the quiet moments. And there are many more quiet moments at the end of life than at the beginning. Be careful what you rehearse. I also learned that giving advice is easy. Living it is the real work. You'll know what to do long before you do it. Wisdom often arrives early. Courage arrives late. Don't confuse the delay with ignorance. You're probably not lost. You're just hesitating. And listen, joy is quieter than pleasure. Pleasure shouts. Joy hums. Joy shows up when you're useful, when you're honest, when you're aligned. You won't always notice it in the moment. Sometimes you only realize later that you were happy back then. That's okay. It still counted. As the years pass, you stop trying to be impressive. You start trying to be sincere. That shift changes everything. You don't need to be exceptional to live well. You need to be awake. Awake to your days, your choices, your responsibilities. All right, let me go further. Because there are things I didn't understand until very late, and they don't fit into neat sayings. There's a quiet danger and comfort that nobody warns you about. Not comfort as rest, but comfort as avoidance. The kind where you stop stretching yourself because it's easier to stay familiar. I watched good years slip by that way. Nothing bad happened, and that was the problem. No alarm, no collapse, just slow erosion. You don't feel yourself settling until one day you realize you haven't surprised yourself in a long time. I learned that courage doesn't always look like bold moves. Sometimes it's admitting you're bored. Sometimes it's saying, this isn't working when everyone else thinks you're doing fine. Most people live lives that look acceptable from the outside and feel hollow on the inside. Applause can be a very effective prison. Another thing I wish I'd known earlier. Thinking is not the same as living. I spent years analyzing decisions instead of making them. Planning felt productive. Waiting felt responsible. In reality, I was just afraid of choosing wrong. You learn more from one imperfect step than from 10 perfect theories. Life doesn't reward accuracy nearly as much as it rewards motion. Let's talk about regret, because it changes shape as you age. When you're young, you regret things you did. When you're old, you regret the things you didn't do, the words you swallowed, the paths you were curious about but never walked, the love you felt but didn't express because it felt risky. Those are the ghosts that stay. I also misunderstood time. I thought I had more of it than I did, and then suddenly I thought I had none at all. The truth is somewhere in between. You always have enough time for what you choose to prioritize. What you don't prioritize quietly disappears. That's not fate, that's arithmetic. You're going to mess things up badly, more than once. That's not a flaw in the system. That's the system. The only real failure is becoming so cautious that nothing touches you anymore. If I sound urgent, it's because I am. Time doesn't negotiate. It doesn't care about your intentions. It only responds to action. You don't need to overhaul your life tomorrow. Just don't keep postponing the life you know you're meant to live. I'm 81. I wake up slower now. I forget names. My body complains more than it cooperates, but my mind is clearer than it's ever been. And if there's one final truth I've earned the right to say, it's this: you don't find your life, you decide it. And the earlier you start deciding, the more of it you actually get to live. Here's something strange that happens with age. You realize most people aren't cruel, they're just scared. Scared of being irrelevant, scared of being wrong, scared of being alone. Once you see that, you stop taking everything personally, and life gets lighter when you stop assuming every slight is an attack. I used to think happiness was a destination, retirement, a paid-off house, quiet mornings. But happiness doesn't live in milestones. It lives in ordinary days you're fully present for. A cup of coffee you actually taste, a conversation you don't rush through, a sunset you don't photograph because you're too busy looking at it. Let me be blunt about success. It doesn't love you back. You can give it your health, your marriage, your youth, and it will still ask for more. I've seen men win everything and lose themselves. I've seen others live modestly and sleep like babies. Decide early what enough means, or you'll spend your whole life chasing a finish line that moves. One thing I'm grateful I eventually learned: curiosity keeps you young longer than fitness ever will. Ask questions. Read things that challenge you. Talk to people younger than you without trying to correct them. The moment you decide you already know how the world works, you start aging fast. And listen closely now. Loneliness isn't the absence of people. It's the absence of truth. You can be surrounded and still feel unseen if you're always performing. Find at least one place, one person, one habit where you don't have to pretend. That's oxygen. I don't have grand answers about the meaning of life. Anyone who tells you they do is selling something. But I've learned this much: meaning comes from responsibility freely chosen, something or someone you show up for even when it's inconvenient. That's what gives days weight. Let me keep going because this part matters even more, and it took me even longer to accept. Nobody tells you how much of life is decided by what you tolerate, not what you chase, what you tolerate. The job that drains you, the friend who belittles you quietly, the routine that slowly turns your days into copies of each other. You don't wake up one morning ruined. You arrive there by allowing small dissatisfactions to pile up until they feel normal. And once something feels normal, you stop questioning it. I tolerated a lot because I thought endurance was a virtue. I thought being tough meant staying. Turns out, staying in the wrong place just teaches you how to shrink. Strength isn't how much you can carry, it's knowing when to put something down. Another hard lesson: you will outgrow people, and that doesn't make you disloyal. It makes you alive. Some folks are meant for chapters, not the whole book. I held on too long because I confused history with destiny. Just because someone knew you when you were young doesn't mean they know who you're becoming. And becoming costs you company. That's the price. Pay it early, it's cheaper. I also want to talk about anger. I wasted years being angry about things that were already over. Old betrayals, missed chances, words I wished I'd said differently. Anger feels active, like you're doing something about the pain. You're not. You're just reliving it. Forgiveness isn't about letting someone off the hook. It's about taking your hands off your own throat. Here it is. Most of what you worry about will never matter, and the things that do matter won't wait for you to feel ready. I wasted decades thinking life was something I had to prepare for, like there was some invisible checkpoint where I'd finally be set. Enough money, enough confidence, enough answers. I kept telling myself, not yet, not yet, not yet. Turns out, not yet is how life slips right past you. I worried about how I looked to people who don't remember my name now. I stayed quiet in rooms where I should have spoken. I stayed in jobs I hated because they felt safe. I postponed joy because responsibility sounded smarter. And no one tells you this when you're young, but responsibility without meaning just turns into regret with a pension. I learned too late that fear wears the mask of practicality. It says, be careful, be realistic, don't rock the boat. But fear isn't there to protect your future. It's there to protect your comfort. And comfort is a terrible boss. It pays you just enough to keep you stuck. Here's another thing that took me far too long to understand. Nobody is watching you as closely as you think. They're busy worrying about themselves. All those nights you stayed up replaying conversations, wondering if you looked foolish or said the wrong thing, that was just you, alone with your own imagination. People move on fast. Regret doesn't. I also learned that love is mostly quiet. It's not fireworks. It's showing up when you're tired, saying sorry when you're sure you're right, choosing the same person on boring Tuesdays. I spent years thinking something was wrong because it didn't feel dramatic. Drama isn't depth. Stability just doesn't shout. And let me tell you something about time. It doesn't speed up. You do. One day you're planning everything, and the next day you're counting what's left. I remember being 33, thinking I had all the time in the world. Blink. I was 50. Blink again. Now I measure years by doctor visits and funerals. If I could give you one practical piece of advice, it's this. Say the thing, make the call, take the walk, quit waiting for permission that isn't coming. No one is going to tap you on the shoulder and say, okay, now you're allowed to live. Take care of your body, not because you want to look good, but because pain steals attention, and attention is life. Take care of your relationships, not because they're perfect, but because they're temporary. And for God's sake, don't confuse being busy with being useful. You don't need to be extraordinary. You just need to be honest about what matters to you and brave enough to act on it sooner than feels comfortable. I'm 81. I don't have many regrets left, mostly because there's no time for them. But if I could spare you even 10 wasted years, this whole life of mine would feel a little more useful. Don't waste yours.